probably already know, my name is Nick, this is Swiftful Thinking, yada yada yada. The good news is that we are now over 50% done with this course. So congratulations, you're halfway there. And in this quick little video, we're just basically going to add a preview view for each of the locations that we were clicked on in the app. So when we click on a location, we want a little card to pop up at the bottom. We'll animate it in, and then it will have some information about that location. So a picture, the name, and the city name, and then maybe some buttons that the user can click on. As you're gonna see in this video, the code that we're gonna write is relatively easy code, but we are gonna do some pretty challenging things to manipulate how these screens are gonna look. We're gonna use a lot of alignments and frames to really create a custom look and feel, custom UI for this preview view. So although this video is longer, the code we're writing is not necessarily harder, but we are gonna take the time to really make sure that our animations and our transitions are really animating the correct way. All right, and we are back. All right, guys, time to get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff of this app. In the last video, we set up this awesome list view here. So if I tap on this list, we get the list popping up, and then we can click on a location. We can move our map. It's looking really good, but there's obviously some stuff we still need to add. In this video, we're gonna add a bottom section that's gonna go on top of the map down here, which will basically be like a little preview of the location that we're clicked on. So right now, if we're clicked on the Eiffel Tower, at the bottom, it'll have like a little picture of the Eiffel Tower, and maybe it'll have the name, the city, Paris, and then maybe there'll be a button that says learn more or something like that, and then we can go and get more details about the Eiffel Tower. So let's set that up, and we're gonna do that in its own view. So let's right click in our views folder. Let's create a new file again, and we're gonna call this one, this will be a SwiftUI view, and we're going to call this one location preview view, and we'll click create. And when we're in here, let's unpin the canvas here. So I have this pinned, this preview. I'm going to unpin it so that we can actually see the preview for this file. And when we get to this preview view, we want to pass in obviously a location. So let's create an initializer here, and we'll pass in a let location of type location. So now every time we create a location preview view, we need to pass in a specific location. So in our preview right here, we're going to get a quick error that we need to pass in a specific location. So I'll click fix. And for right now, just for this preview, I'm going to access the locations data service. That's this file here that has all of our locations. And then I'll access the locations array inside the service, and then we're just going to get the first item in the array. So we're going to do locations data service dot locations dot first, and I'm going to explicitly unwrap it with an exclamation mark here. We're doing this is again, avoid explicit unwrapping whenever you can, but we're doing this just for right now because we know there are locations here, and we are also just in the preview. So this is not going to actually be part of our app when we actually build it and submit it to real users. But anyway, just to make sure that this location is here, let's just put on the screen here location.name. And let's click resume and just make sure that we are getting, I think it should say the Coliseum. Awesome. All right, so let's start building this out. Let's actually put this text in a VStack. So I'm going to hold the command button and click on the word text, and then go down to embed in a VStack. All right, so on this VStack, I'm then going to hold the command button and click on the VStack, and then we're going to click on Show SwiftUI Inspector. So we can see some of the stuff that we can add to this VStack here, and the spacing we're going to make 16 points. In most of my courses, I would just type this out, but I just want to show you guys like that you can be doing it that way as well. So spacing of 16 on this VStack. On the top of the VStack, we're actually going to put an image. So let's create a Z stack in here, and then inside the Z stack, we're going to say if let image name equals the location dot image names. Remember, we have an array of image names inside each location, and then we're going to try to get the first one from that array. So if there is the first one, we're going to get this image name, and then we'll open the brackets. And so then, of course, if we get the image name, let's then put the image with the image name on the screen. So we should see the picture of the Coliseum. Obviously, way too big for our app, so let's make it resizable. Let's make it scaled to fill. Now we made it even bigger, so let's give it a frame real quick with a width of maybe 100, a height of 100, and we can delete the alignment. So now we should have much more practical size here. Let's also give it a corner radius of 10, so we got those nice corners here. And then I want to add a little bit of a border to the outside of the image here. So on the edge, I'm going to add a white border, but let's make it red right now just so that we can see it on the background here. So firstly, let's add a background onto the Z stack. So the background, let's do color.red, just so we can see it. So you can see that it's barely there. What we're going to do is add padding of 6 before we add the background. So the padding, the background's then actually 6 spaces out of the image. And we're going to then also just add a corner radius onto that background as well. So we'll do corner radius of 10. So it matches the corner radius of the image. And now we have this pretty cool outline here. Of course, we want to make this white. So I'm going to just make it white quickly. And now we can't see it, but we know it's there. So what we're going to do is on the preview, which is this canvas on the right side here, we're just going to put the preview here inside a Z stack. So I'll hold the command button and click on the location preview view. Put it in a Z stack. This is just for the preview. And then let's add a color.blue.ignore safe area behind it. So the background of our device is now blue, and we can see that nice white border, which I think looks perfect. All right, now let's do this name. We have the name here, but it doesn't look very good. So let's put it in a VStack itself. And then below the text of the name, let's also add a text of the location.city name. Let's do a little formatting down here. So maybe this text, let's make a font of, just a font of maybe title 2. Title 2 will look good. A little bit bigger there. Let's also make it .font weight of bold, so it's a little thicker. And then maybe on the city name, we'll do .font of subheadline, so it's a little smaller. Of course, the text we want to align to the left side. So this V stack, I'm going to add alignment of leading. And again, for those of you who want to use the inspector, we could instead just hold the command button and click on the word V stack, show SwiftUI Inspector, and then we can get the leading alignment right here. So same deal, we got this. Let's also add spacing of 4 into here. So that looks good. All right, our body section is getting a little long here. This is already a lot of code to look at. So let's start breaking this up so that we can stay nice and neat and organized. So firstly, of course, we have our image here. I'm going to cut it, come down here. Let's create another extension of location preview view. Staying nice and organized is probably the most important part of writing SwiftUI code. Let's make a private var, and let's just call this image section of type SomeView. Paste in our image here. So then we'll take our image section and just put that up here in our body. Click resume, make sure it still works. Let's do the same thing with the title here. So I'll cut this. We'll come down here, we'll make this a private var, we'll call this title section, type SomeView, paste in our title section, and then we'll paste in our title section here. So keeping the body nice and neat, highly readable, this code right here is. Let's click resume, make sure we are still all connected and working. And now I want to add some buttons to the right side of this. So I'm going to embed this entire VStack if we hold the command button and click on it. And we'll bed it in a HStack. All right, so on the right side of that VStack, we're going to add another VStack. Open the brackets. In here, we're going to have 2 buttons. So let's add a button, and we'll use the action and label. We don't have the action right now, but we can add a label. And let's do maybe a text that says learn more. Let's give it a font of maybe headline to make it a little bit bigger. Awesome. And then on the entire button, let's add a .button style. I went over this a couple videos back in the SwiftUI Bootcamp playlist. An iOS 15 feature is these button styles where we can add a .border prominent style. And we get this really cool style pretty much just right out of the box. I do want to change the size of it a little bit. So inside the label of the button, we're going to actually just add a frame. And let's make it a width of maybe 125 and a height of uh, 30, and then we don't need the alignment. Let's see what that looks like. Better. Let's actually make it maybe 35, a little taller. That looks good. Awesome. We don't have this action. We're going to do that in a second. But below this button is going to be another one. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it down here. So we'll do 2 buttons. The second one is just going to say next. And then I want it to be obviously different color. We can't have 2 big red buttons. This would look a little weird. So let's do button style of maybe bordered for this one. So it's a little less prominent. It's just bordered. And it looks like it's turning blue, but that's just because it's the background. I think if we have our background as maybe black, we can actually see that it will be like a nice little gray with the red text, and that looks a little bit better, a little more natural. But of course, the black is now covering up our black text. So let's just make this maybe, so let's actually just change this to maybe green. Maybe we can see everything a little bit better that way. Cool. All right. And this VStack, let's actually add some spacing onto this VStack of maybe 8, a little bit bigger, just right in here. And again, the body's getting long here, so let's cut out some of these buttons. So this button I'm going to cut, come down to the bottom. Let's make a private var, and we'll call this the Learn More button of type SomeView. Paste in that button. And let's do one more with our next button. We're going to cut it, come down to the bottom. Let's do a private var next button of type SomeView. Paste that in. Staying nice, staying neat, staying organized. And of course, this VStack will just be our Learn More button followed by our next button. And that's going to look awesome. And just look how readable this body is. It's amazing. I love it. All right, so we got our buttons here. A couple things I want to do some formatting here. So firstly, I want to push these apart so they're as big as they possibly can be. And we could add a spacer in between this stack, but even better than that, we can just add a frame on one of these components to make it as big as possible. So on this text here, what I'm going to do, where's the text? The title section here. So if we add a background onto the title section, let's do color.blue for a second. We can see that it's just this little section here. So what I'm going to actually do before that background layer is add a frame with a max width of infinity. And we'll see that it'll now push as big as possible. And then of course we want to align the text to the left side of that frame. So on this frame, we're also going to add an alignment of leadings. Now we're pushed all the way to the left here. And I'm going to delete this color blue because we don't really need that background. We just wanted to look at it. And now, of course, we have one problem, and it's that the image is not lined up with this text, right? So let's come up here. Let's look. So it's the background of the VStack. We'll do color.blue here. We can see that this is the whole VStack. So the problem is that the VStack is not lined up. So on the VStack, let's hold the command button and click on it. Click on Show SwiftUI Inspector, and then we can align this VStack to the leading edge. So now we got the image lined up here, which is looking a little bit better. I'm going to delete this color blue again. The next problem I want to solve is that these buttons, I want to be aligned to the bottom of this entire stack. So on this H stack, I'm going to add a background, and we'll do color.blue. So we can see the entire H stack here. So clearly the items in this H stack, the horizontal stack, we have one item here and we have one item here. And if we look at the background on this second stack, I'll make it background. Let's do color.orange. We can see that it's aligned right in the center vertically of the H stack. But really what we want is to align it to the bottom. So on this H stack, we are going to add alignment of bottom. And we'll also do spacing of 0 while we're at it. So now it's lined to the bottom. And I'm going to delete this background color and this background color, and this is looking a little bit better. And now, of course, we got to make it look a little bit better than this because it's too close to the edge of our device. We got to add some padding around here. So on this entire H stack, let's add padding, maybe 20. We'll push it in there. And then on the background of that H stack, let's add a rounded rectangle. And we'll do a corner radius of 10 to match the same corner radius that we have on the image. Cool. And then we'll fill that rectangle because obviously we don't want it to be black. So let's fill it with a .system material. So we're going to type in material. This is another new iOS 15 feature that I covered in the SwiftUI Bootcamp, and we're going to use the ultra thin material. So the ultra thin material is awesome because it has a little bit of a bleed through. So you can see through this material that there's a green background. And it's going to look really cool on our map because we'll be able to tell very subtly that there is actually a map behind it. This is not an opaque color. There's a little bit of bleed, which is a pretty cool UI effect. And the final thing we're going to do here is that this entire background, I wanted to basically stop right in the center of this image. I think it will look a little bit cooler than this. So what we're going to do is give it a .offset. So we're just offsetting the background layer of this object here. And we're going to do just a Y, and we'll push it down maybe 50 points. So it's going south here. Let's do a little more than that. Let's do 65, and that'll look better. So it's kind of right in the middle of the image, but it looks very natural with this button here. So I think that'll be a nice UI for our app. And then our last problem is, of course, that we don't want it to go past the bottom of the frame here. So we moved it down, but now it's extending past the bottom of our frame. So all we really want to do is just clip it to this frame. And we're going to do that. We could call .clipped, and we'll clip it to the actual frame. But when we do call .clipped, there's not going to be any kind of corner radius here. So what we're going to actually do is just add a corner radius of 10 onto this, and that will also clip it while adding the corner radius. And now there's a little bit of a radius there. Hard to see, but it's there. Finally, on the preview, let's just add a bit of padding just to push it all in a little bit. So that is kind of what our location preview will look like. And I think it looks pretty damn good. And the code really wasn't that hard. There's a lot of moving parts here, but I don't think it was very challenging code to write. It's just kind of working a lot with these alignments and these spacings to get this really cool, nice effect. All right, let's take this location preview view and let's put this on our screen and kind of implement it with the rest of our app now. So we're going to go into the locations view. This is our main home view again. Let's go up to the top here. So we have our header, we have padding, and then we have a spacer. And that's going to push the header to the top, and we want this section to be at the bottom. So let's put this underneath the spacer. And what we're going to do is add a Z stack, and then we'll do a for each, and we'll open the parentheses. And we're going to do for each, and then we're going to use let's use the data here with the identifiable completion. So we'll do vm.locations. So all of the locations in our view model. We'll press enter, and we're going to finish up this completion here with for location in. So we're looping on all these locations. We're going to get this location, and then when we get a location, we can of course add a location preview view, and we'll pass in our location, and we should see them pop up down here in a Z stack. All right, so firstly we want to push it off the edges of the device. So let's add some padding onto this preview view. And I also want to give it, let's do before the padding, maybe a quick shadow. We'll do color.black.opacity of 0.3. And let's just give it a radius of maybe 20, and we don't need to change the X and the Y. So just do a quick little shadow there. It's going to look dark right now, and you're probably wondering why is it looking so dark? And that's because right now we have a Z stack, and we're looping on all of the locations, and we're putting the location preview view on the screen for all of the locations. So if we have, what do we have, like 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 5 locations in our app right now, and there's 5 location preview views stacked on top of each other right here. So this is how we wanted to start, but of course we only really want to draw one on the screen at a time, and the one that we want is the one that's currently selected. So what we're going to do is before we draw the location preview view, we're going to say if the vm.map location, so this will be our current selected location, if it is equal to the location that we are looping on in this loop here, then we'll open the brackets. So only if it's equal to the current map location will we add this location preview view. So now you're going to see that this shadow is going to be a little less intense because there's only one being drawn on here and not 5. So that's great. All right, so now if we click and change the location, we can see that this updates, and if we click it, it's clearly updating, and we could leave it just like this. I mean, this is not a bad UI, right? Because it's kind of the same preview view, so the only thing that's changing is the image and the name, and honestly, I thought about just leaving it like this because that looks kind of good. But we are learning in this course, and we kind of want to do some more complex UI than just that. So what we're going to do is actually just transition these on and off the screen. So when we draw this onto the screen, let's use a transition. And it's going to be .asymmetrical because we want to do a different transition on the insertion than on the removal. So let's make this a little bigger here. So I'll make these multiple lines. And for the insertion, we want it to come in from the right side of the screen. So we're going to do .move, and we'll do the trailing edge. That's the right side. And then the removal, when we want to get it off the screen, we want it to push off to the left side of the screen. So that will also be a move, but we're going to go to the leading edge. So it'll push off to the left edge now. And if I change this, we should get a nice little preview here. And these transitions don't look great in the canvas. So let's actually try to build this to our actual simulator and see if it works. So let's look at our map.swift file here, and the locations view is actually the first file. So I'm just going to build and run this to a simulator. I'm going to go to an iPhone 13, but it should work on any iPhone or iPad right now, but we're going to deal with the iPad later. So let's just build it to an iPhone, and let's check this out quickly. We can see these are animating when I click them and go to the next one. It's actually looking pretty good. I thought we were going to have to do some more work than this. But they're pushing in from the left and they're pushing out onto the right, which is exactly kind of what we wanted. So I think that's looking pretty good. The map's updating, the location at the top's updating. Now I also want to be able to click this next button. And if we click this button, I want to do the same thing, but just go to the next location. So we don't have to keep clicking on this menu. So let's handle that next button and then we'll wrap up this video. So that next button is going to be in the location preview view. We have our next button down here, and basically when we click next, all we need to do is kind of the same thing that we're doing when we click on this menu. We just need to update the location to the next location. So all that logic, of course, we don't want to do it in our view. We want to do it where all of our location data is being stored. That's all in our locations view model. So let's jump into the view model, and when we update the list, we actually call show next location, and we pass in a location. And we kind of want to do the same thing here, except this time when we click the next button, the UI doesn't have the next location. We just need to find what the next location is in our array of locations. So we're going to need a function to do that. So coming down here, let's make another func, and let's say next button pressed. Open close parentheses and open the brackets. So we'll call this from that button. And now, of course, we need to figure out what is the next location in our array. So if we come back and look at this array, so the current location is this map location. And then all of our locations is this array. So firstly, we need to figure out is this current location, what index is this current location inside this array? So based on that, we could then find the next location. So let's come down here. So first, let's get the current index, and we'll say let current index equals the locations array dot first index where, and we're going to press enter. And then this will be each location in the locations array, and we're going to look for the first index where this location is equal to the map location. So here we will return where the location is equal to the map location. All right, and a faster way of writing this is actually we could just do let current index equals locations dot first index, and we'll just open the brackets here. We're using $0, which is the location, and we'll set that equal to map location. So this line of code, same thing as this line of code, but it's a little bit more efficient. And then, of course, if we hold the option button and click on current index, we can see that it is optional. So there's a chance that we can't get the current index. And that would theoretically be if the map location was not actually in our locations array. Now, we know it's always going to happen, but in theory, the code doesn't know that. So we really want to unwrap this safely and make sure that we can get the current index. So let's put this in a guard statement. So we'll say guard let this equals this, else, and then we will return. So if we can't get the current index, let's just print out to the console could not find current index in locations array. Should never happen. So this printout should never happen, but we now know if this prints out to the console, we did something wrong. So we're getting our current index nice and safely. And now we need to check if the current index is valid, right? So if we had the locations array and the current index was the last item in the array, well then the next index might be outside of the array, right? There's only so many items in this array. So we want to make sure that the next index is actually a valid item. So first let's get we'll say let next index. The next index would be the current index plus 1, right? So we're just going to the next index. And then let's check it. So we'll do another guard statement. We'll say guard locations.indices .contains. So this indices is all of the available indexes inside the locations array. And we're going to check that the next index is actually available. So if this array contains the next index, then obviously there is an item at that index. And we'll say else, and then we can return here. But we want to do a little bit of code here. So if we can't get the next index, we got to think about when that might happen. So that's going to actually happen if we're clicking our next button, right? And we get to the last item in the locations array. So if we get to, let's say there are 5 items and we get to index number 4, so it's the last index. If we try to go to the next one, obviously that item doesn't exist in the array. So what we want to do is instead of do nothing in our app, we just want to go back to the first item. So in here, we'll say next item is, we'll say next index is not valid, and then we will restart from 0. So we're going to call this function here that we already have set up, our show next location, and we just want to pass in the first location. And to get that, we're just going to say let first location equals locations dot first. And obviously this first is optional. We've dealt with this a bunch now. So if we hold the optional, we can see that it's optional. So let's just safely unwrap it. We know there's always going to be an item, the first item in this locations if we get to this point in our app. So we know it's always going to be there, but the code doesn't, and we want to safely unwrap that just in case. So guard let first location equals this, else return. And we could add another print statement there if there's an error, just like we did here, but we're not going to because there's always going to be a first item in the locations array. We'll then pass our first location into here. So we're almost done. Final thing is if the locations does contain the index, then we come down here and this would be next index is valid. And so we can get the location. We'll say let next location equals the locations array, and we'll access the item at the next index. So generally I don't like accessing items at a specific index because if there is no item at this index, then this could crash our app. But we're doing this safely because here we are first checking that there is an item at this index. So because we safely checked it first, then we can and access it directly. But if we didn't have this guard statement, this would be pretty dangerous code here because then we would be accessing an index that we think is there, but it might not be. So it's pretty important that we have this in our code just in case. Otherwise, we might crash our app. But now that we get this next location, of course, we want to show the next location, and we'll pass in next location. And I think that looks pretty good. I think that wraps up this function here. So let's call this from our code next button press. Let's jump back to the location preview view. And we need to actually get access to the environment, to that view model. So in this location preview view, which is also going to be its child of the locations view, we can actually access and pull that view model from the environment. So here let's add an @environment object. And we'll say private var VM, and it'll be of type locations view model. so we can get that. And of course our preview is going to crash because we need to add that to our preview. So on this preview here, I'm just going to add a .environment object, and we'll pass in a new locations view model. Open close parentheses. And now that we have access to this VM, this view model, let's go down to our button, next button, and we'll just call vm.nextButtonPressed. I'm going to build this to our simulator one more time, and let's test it out. We could do it on the canvas. I don't think we need a simulator, but it will look better on the simulator. And let's just start clicking this next button. And it looks like it's working perfectly. We're going to add some pins to the map in a future video, so it's going to look better than this. But looking at the next button at the bottom here, we can see that it is working, and I'm looping through all of the locations. So clearly it's restarting at the end, and that's because we added that logic in there. And that is perfect. So we can click next down here. We get this nice animation. The map's updating in real time. And of course, we can change it from our list at the top here. So we're writing a lot of good code here. This is all one big moving part, and it's making the UI of this app just look so good. All right, guys, that was it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. We got a pretty big feature added to our app today, and I think it's looking good. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I'm Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.